Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, we're here today with Elyan Rosenbaum. How are you?
Hi, doing well, thank you.
Great. You want to tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, how long you're married for?
Sure. I am a mental health counselor, a recent mental health counselor. I've been married for almost 16 years now. That's an interesting sort of combination I'm finding because during my training and all that, it was interesting for me to see how I sort of struggled in a way to wear those different hats and not to confuse the two, right? Because on the one hand, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and that's my values and what I hold dear in terms of my roles. On the other hand, I am a mental health counselor, and the two have common themes in them, and yet they're different, right? And so, I wouldn't want to have the same sort of relationship with my clients as I would with my husband or my children. And so it's been a really interesting journey for me to kind of find that balance of at home, I'm at home, and at work, I'm at work, and not to confuse the two. And so
And
this
then
is
here
what,
I came and stuck the two
yeah,
on the same question.
I'm still learning. I'm still always learning. I'm a lifelong learner, and it's exciting for me to see how I sort of maneuver and figure it out for myself. So yeah, great question.
So how were you able to split the two of them?
It's definitely a learning process, and it's in terms of my response. Like, I guess during my training and even now as a counselor, like, I'm learning so much about myself, about mankind and human behaviors, but also about myself and how I can be the best version of myself. And so, it's sort of trial and error, as is life. It doesn't come with the manual so much. So it's kind of like, when I have let's say a challenge, I'm faced with a challenge, or let's say, for example, a disagreement, say with my husband, which is healthy and normal. Do I then put on my counselor hat and say, well, how do I best approach this to kind of have us both heard and seen and come to some sort of compromise? Or do I kind of revert back to, well, I'm a wife, and these are my values and these are his values, and how do I play the wife role?
Yeah, it's like you have to bring the skills you learned as a mental health counselor, but use them as a wife, not as a counselor.
That's right. That's right. I remember actually a funny story where one of my daughters, she's a teenager. She says to me, she was struggling with something, and she says to me, she calls me Ima in Hebrew. Ima is mother. She says, Ima, I don't want a counselor. I want a mother. Right? It's like, I don't need you to take on that sort of empathic sort of counselor role in the moment. I want you to kind of just be real with me, just be a mom. And so that was a wake up call. Like, yes, it's okay to sort of leave my counselor hat at the door. And when I walk in, come back to just my regular mom, wife, perfectly imperfect role,
Yeah, because they're both very similar in the way of giving and taking care of one another, but in different ways. So it's hard to figure out. You use weird.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what makes your relationship extraordinary?
So that's a great question. I actually wouldn't describe my relationship as extraordinary, more just ordinary. And I think there's beauty in that, right? That it's a work in progress, as is most relationships. We have our challenges and our life challenges and things that we can learn from and grow together. And I think that's sort of what is beautiful about our relationship in specific, but in most human relationships, I would think that there is an element of not being stagnant, not just staying where you are, but continually working together to make it more enriched and more beautiful in that way. So I don't know that mine is extraordinary. I would call it just ordinary, and that's great the way it is.
Yeah, ordinary that has the extraordinary part of always working on it.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you deal with challenges?
That's a great question. And I think I would connect it back to where I am as a mental health counselor. I think perhaps I have always had a tendency to be sort of optimistic and, positive. I think that is part of my personality, but realistically, not in a way that I look at it, everything with rose-colored glasses, but kind of just being realistic in my approach to life in general. I've sort of learned through my training and through working with my clients the terminology that goes with that, right? In therapy, we call it a positive reframe, right? And so it's really how you perceive the world and how you perceive your challenges that creates your own reality, which is such a fascinating concept, right? If we view everyone as doing their best with what they're given, how that just changes our perspective of them, makes it easier for us, right? So let's say, for example, a challenge in my relationship, a miscommunication or a misunderstanding or a different point of view, right? And so if I can sort of take an objective perspective, right, and look at this as here, he's doing his best with what he's got, I'm doing my best with what I've got, it sort of takes away the need for judgment or the shoulds or the coulds, right? And allows us to focus on what is, right? So I do believe that he has our best interest in mind, as well as I would like to believe I have our best interest in mind. And so if I can recognize that he's really doing his best in the moment with what, the information he has or his values or the way he views things, and I'm also doing my best, it allows me to remove that judgment piece, like, oh, he should think that, or he could do that, or if only that, right? It's no, we're all in this together and just doing the best we can. So really it's taking that sort of positive reframe of the situation and creating the reality based on that, as opposed to viewing it in a negative light. Yeah, so that's that concept. I think it's also important when you're dealing with challenges within a relationship to focus really on, again, it's this perspective taking, focus on what's going right instead of focus on what's not going right. It's the idea that, again, we create our own realities. And if things are not going the way I necessarily want them to go, I can validate that and say that's a legitimate concern for myself, but I can also choose what I focus on. So if I can spend my time focusing on what I would rather change, or I can spend my time focusing on what is going the right way, that really changes our perspective and changes our mood as well, right? If I'm focusing on what's going right versus what's going wrong, I'll just be more content. I'll be more hopeful. I'll be more optimistic. Another great point I thought I would mention was the idea that not to internalize what's going on around us. And that is so much easier said than done, specifically with relationships, right? Because we as humans will very often kind of say, well, this is our relationship. You are responding as a reflection to me and I looking at you as you. But if we can take that sort of external approach and recognize that in every sort of interaction that we have, whether it's with our spouses, whether it's with our coworkers, whether it's with our family or neighbors or friends, we have two sort of ways to have that experience. One sense is a chance for us to take accountability. Yes, I was in the wrong here. Yes, I need to work on this certain aspect and take accountability and responsibility for my piece in this relationship. And there's another aspect of recognizing there's also a need for emotional boundaries, right? And so some of it is my stuff and I have to take accountability about that. And some of it is absolutely nothing to do with me. It's really the other person's things, right? So let's say, for example, he comes home from work and he seems to be super tired. And because perhaps he's tired, maybe his patience is not as long as we might like or need in the moment. And so maybe perhaps he gets frustrated with something. And so I have a choice in the moment. I can say, well, is this about me and that I am frustrating him and I need to work on that? Or can I recognize that he's had a long day? He had a really hard day. He maybe didn't get much sleep last night. And so his sort of perhaps shorter fuse than usual really isn't about me so much as it is more about him and his need to get a good night rest and, have a good dinner and take care of himself so that he can be renewed and refreshed, right? And so it's not internalizing that, because if he came home and I internalized that and said, well, it's about me, I can imagine that would make me feel, frustrated or annoyed or sad about myself, or beating myself up about the situation. But if I can recognize that it's not only me, right? I have to take accountability for what is my responsibility, but there are pieces that are more about the other person.
Yeah. The last part that you just said about not internalizing things is really the whole answer of everything together. First of all, it's of what you say, where your focus goes, what makes your reality. So if you were, for example, in that situation to have taken that in on you, you make it your reality that all of a sudden it's your problem, and it will become your problem because that's what you're causing to yourself. And also where you're focusing on, that's what is going to happen more. So all of a sudden, if you were to think that this was now your problem, then that's what you would focus on more, and it would just happen now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you get through hard times?
A great question, right? And we're all going to have challenges and hard times, and that's part of being human. And so I think what found to be of key importance is the idea of real, authentic communication. There's that concept we're given two ears and one mouth, right? The idea that we want to listen more than we speak. I think that is really key, right? Like, let's say in couples therapy, what I would do with a couple that are really enthusiastic about improving their relationship, right? They are on the same page and wanting to enhance their relationship. The work that they need to do together, and we can do that in therapy, is the idea that I'll ask one of the partners to say something about the way they feel about a certain situation. And then I'll have the other partner speak to that first partner, and they don't respond, but all they say is a reiteration of what that first person said, right? So if somebody says, I feel frustrated when I believe that I'm always the one doing the dishes. So the second partner might then just reiterate what the first partner said and saying, sounds like you have a hard time with the fact that very often you're the one to be doing all the cleanup after your long day. And that in itself is what allows the couple to move forward, because the first partner is being seen, being heard, being understood. And that's really all that we want within our relationships. I see you. I fully understand what you're saying. And now that I have clarified that I fully understand you, now I can respond and say, well, this is my experience of it. And can you understand me on that end, right? And then together they kind of will recognize we want what's best for both of us. We want to do this together. We're committed. And so is there a way that we can meet each other's needs in that, now that we fully understand each other? So I think that is a key in getting through the harder times, really being open with your communication, really understanding each other, and saying to your partner, I fully see you, I fully understand you, and I respect that you understand me and fully see me.
Yeah, and they say, like, if you want to get in good rapport with someone, you just repeat back the exact same words that they used. They say to start with the last three they used. Start your first sentence. Last three words they used, and as you get better, you could use more words that they're using, and shouldn't take long, and they'll be your really good friend. Yeah. So what has helped you get to where you are today?
I think, again, this is not something mind-blowing or whatever, but something that is continuously spoken about and discussed within the mental health field for clinicians, for the therapists, right? And I think it comes into all facets of our lives, not only in the therapy world. And that's the idea of self-care. One of my favorite quotes, you can't pour from an empty cup, meaning that you need to be recharged yourself in order to give to others, in order to be there for others. And so whether it's my clients, whether it's my family, whether it's my community, the idea that I need to take care of myself so that I am best able to be my best self, and because it's important for me to give to others, that I am able to give to others. And I think part of self-care, there's so many needs that we have as humans: physical needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs. We have different interests, we have different living environments and social needs. All these things are important pieces. I think what I've learned through my experiences and through my training was the idea of setting and maintaining healthy boundaries. And we spoke a bit about that earlier with emotional boundaries, but the idea that I need to be aware of what I can do, what is in my sort of ability, and how much of it I can do, and then say no if I'm not able to, right? And so moving away from wanting to be a people pleaser or wanting to heal the world, recognizing that I'm limited as a human and there's just so much that I can do, especially when the matter of saying yes to someone else and then saying no to myself, sort of having the strength and courage to recognize that that's not helpful. It's not helpful to the person I'm attempting to help, and it's not helpful to myself, right? Because if I'm saying yes to somebody else and limiting myself, whatever the circumstance is, how am I going to be my best self? How can I give of my best self if I'm going to essentially be burnt out, if I'm not going to be recharged before I can get to that person?
Yeah. You mentioned that you began learning this or focusing on this when you started your training. Before your training, was your life different?
So I don't know that it was different. It was just that I think my training puts words to concepts and ideas that I never actually thought of in that way, right? So it's true, I do have a tendency, or I have had a tendency to be a bit of a people pleaser, wanting to show up for other people, even when it not be helpful to myself, and extending myself too much almost for other people. It took me time to recognize that self-care isn't selfish. It's actually the opposite. It's necessary in order to give my best and not build resentment or frustration, but rather take care of me so that I can be the best wife, mom, counselor, friend, family member, instead of feeling like I'm stretched too thin, or I just don't have time for myself, or building those really negative emotions of frustration and resentment. There's like this sort of push within the therapy world, because obviously you don't want to have a therapist working with a client that is not in their best state. And so there's a push, sort of ethically, we need to be doing our best and feeling our best to be able to help our best. And I think this applies, across all different facets of life and within all our relationships, even, at work or whatever. You don't want to be an employee who's burnt out and just has no energy anymore. You want your employees to perform their best. And the only way that they can do that is by making sure that their needs are taken care of.
Yeah. What relationship advice would you give to someone who wants to have an extraordinary relationship?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Standing on one foot, what would I say? Well, I think a lot of what we spoke about today might be helpful for some people, but I think it's that idea that our relationships are all a work in progress. There's that concept of trying to go up a down escalator. The idea that when we are content and not working, we're just staying put. If we're on a down escalator, then we're going down. Versus if you view your relationships as a down escalator and you want to get to the top of that escalator, you continuously need to work. You need to apply yourself. You need to be present. You need to work through all the challenges and view them as learning opportunities to make your relationship better and better, right? To reach that top. Don't be content with just, where you're at, but rather want even more for your relationship and want to grow together, want to learn together, want to face challenges together. And those are opportunities to strengthen your relationship, opportunities to learn from each other, learn more about ourselves, and hopefully grow together within the relationship.
Yeah, because if your relationship's not getting better, it's getting worse.
Basically, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you for your time and being here today.
Have you ordered the Genius Relationship online course yet? If not, you're missing out. Experts in the field share their top secrets on how you could take your relationship to the next level, how you could understand your partner, how you could connect and deepen your relationship. Go to geniusrelationships.com now to learn more about it and get your COVID-19 special today. Link in the show notes. Did you enjoy that episode? Could you do me a personal favor and subscribe and leave a review? It would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.